She walked into Judge Frank Caprio's courtroom like she owned the place. Madeline Cross, millionaire entrepreneur, luxury brand icon, and the kind of woman who believed red lights were suggestions, didn't even bother to look up from her phone. Seconds later, she would do the unthinkable, interrupt the judge, insult him to his face, and attempt to walk out in the middle of her own hearing. But what she didn't know was that this would be the day someone finally stopped her. And it wouldn't be money, connections, or her carefully curated power. It would be a courtroom where character weighs more than a bank account, and where Judge Caprio's quiet authority can shatter the biggest ego. Before we dive into this explosive showdown, tell me in the comments, where are you watching from, and what time is it right now? And if you love real stories where justice hits harder than arrogance, make sure to subscribe. You won't want to miss what happens next. Madeline Cross didn't just enter the courtroom, she occupied it. As if the wooden benches and fading seal on the wall were merely props in a world built for her convenience. She stood there in heels that echoed like declarations of superiority, her tailored suit shimmering under the fluorescent lights. Even before Judge Caprio addressed her, the tension in the room had already curled itself around every spectator like an invisible rope. Everyone could feel it. This wasn't going to be a normal traffic hearing. The bailiff had warned the judge moments earlier. "She's been difficult, Your Honor." A diplomatic way of saying she had insulted two clerks, refused to wait in line, and demanded a private room befitting my status. It was the kind of arrogance that spread ahead of her like a perfume, strong, sharp, and impossible to ignore. And yet Judge Frank Caprio started the hearing with the same calm tone he used for everyone, from teenagers with overdue parking tickets to grandparents struggling to make ends meet. "Ms. Cross," he said, "please step forward." She didn't move at first. She finished typing a message on her phone, sighed as if inconvenienced by the very idea of justice, and only then began to approach the bench. Her eyes never fully lifted. They flicked up and down like she was taking inventory of something beneath her. "Ms. Cross," the judge repeated gently, "I'm going to need your full attention today." That was when she finally looked up. Her expression wasn't anger, it was amusement. A quiet, dangerous sort of amusement. The kind that says, "You think this matters to me." "If we can make this fast," she said, "I have an important investor call at 11. A hush rolled across the courtroom. Not loud, not dramatic, just a collective tightening the sound of every spectator wondering how far she would push this. Judge Caprio didn't raise his voice, didn't lean forward, didn't show even a flicker of irritation. "Ms. Cross, speeding in a residential zone is a serious matter. You were cited for driving 58 miles per hour in a 30 zone. I'd like to hear your explanation." She shrugged. "The limit on that road is ridiculous. I drive it every day. It's practically empty. Honestly, whoever set that speed limit should try joining the real world." A few people gasped softly, not because the words were shocking, but because she dared to say them here, in a courtroom where most people chose their words like stepping stones across a river. Judge Caprio remained steady. "That neighborhood has families, children, elderly residents. Speed limits are set for their protection." Madeline snorted, actually snorted. "Maybe they should teach their kids not to play in the street." For a moment, even the hum of the ceiling lights seemed to stop. There it was, the first crack in her carefully polished facade, revealing something far less flattering underneath. Entitlement, carelessness, a disdain for anyone who wasn't living her high-speed, high-status life. "Ms. Cross," the judge said slowly, "your comment shows a troubling disregard for public safety." "My safety is fine," she replied. "I've been driving for 25 years, and I've never had an accident. If anything, I'm a better driver than most of the people who live in that area." "Yet," Caprio replied, lifting her record, "you have 3 prior speeding citations in the last 2 years. She waved her hand dismissively. 3 tickets in 2 years. Please, I pay them. That's how the system works, isn't it?" Her tone was sweet poison, the kind that made people lean back instinctively. The judge's eyes sharpened, though his voice stayed level. The purpose of a citation is not to collect money, Ms. Cross. It's to prevent dangerous driving and protect the public. You can say that, she said, but everyone knows the city relies on people like me, people with money to pay for these things. So let's skip the lecture. I'll pay whatever fee you need and be on my way. The audacity of it hung in the air like smoke. But beneath her arrogance, there was another layer, one only a trained observer might detect. A twitch in her jaw, a quick glance at the clock, a restless shifting of weight. This wasn't just arrogance. It was habituated power, a lifetime of winning by force of personality and financial dominance. And she expected this courtroom to fold like every board meeting, negotiation, or confrontation she'd ever bulldozed through. Judge Caprio, however, was unmovable. Ms. Cross, this is not a transaction. It is a legal process. And I am telling you, she said, that my time is far more valuable than this. Whatever this is. She gestured dismissively at the courtroom, at the people seated behind her, at the judge himself, as if they were all inconveniences arranged solely to annoy her. Someone in the back whispered, "Wow." Another shook their head. Caprio glanced briefly toward the gallery, then back at Madeline. "Ms. Cross, tell me, do you believe the law applies to you?" She smiled a sharp, metallic smile. "I believe the law is flexible for people who actually contribute something to society. I employ 140 people. I pay more taxes in a month than many residents in that neighborhood earn in a year. So yes, maybe I do think the system treats people like me differently." "And you expect that here?" he asked. "Of course," she said simply. There was no hesitation, no shame, no awareness of how many people had just sucked in a breath. "Ms. Cross," Caprio said softly. Justice does not have tears, but she was already done with the conversation. She pulled out her phone again and began tapping rapidly. "Put that away," the judge ordered. "Phones are not permitted during active proceedings." "No," she said. "I'm sending a message. This is taking too long." Judge Caprio leaned forward for the first time. His voice remained steady, but something in its tone shifted, like a quiet bell being struck. "Ms. Cross, if you do not put that phone down, we will address an entirely different issue." She looked up slowly, bored and irritated. "So what?" "You'll find me more. I don't care about—" "This is not about fines," he interrupted. Her eyebrows lifted, clearly intrigued. "Then what is it about?" "It is about respect," he said. She blinked, as if he had spoken a word she had never needed to learn. "Respect," she scoffed. "Judge, with all due respect," he raised a hand. "Ms. Cross, real respect, the kind that recognizes the weight of the law, the safety of others, and the authority of this court." She exhaled a short laugh. "You're serious?" "Very," he replied. A woman sitting in the second row murmured, "This is going to get interesting." And it did, because instead of responding, Madeline turned slightly and took a small, almost casual step toward the courtroom door. The bailiff's eyes widened. Judge Caprio stiffened. But Madeline didn't look back, didn't ask permission. She simply kept walking, heel by heel, toward the exit, as if she were leaving a grocery store aisle. That single motion, dismissive, entitled reckless, would change everything that followed. For a split second, no one moved. It was as if the entire courtroom inhaled at the same time and forgot how to exhale. Madeline Cross, millionaire, CEO woman who claimed laws were guidelines for the poor, had just turned her back on Judge Frank Caprio and was walking away mid-hearing. Her heels clicked on the tile floor, each step sounding like a dare. 1 step, 2 steps, 3. That was when Judge Caprio's voice cut through the silence. "Ms. Cross," he said, calm, but carrying a steel edge no one had heard from him yet. "If you take one more step toward that door, you will be held in contempt of court." Madeline did not stop immediately. She paused just slightly, then tilted her head back with a mocking smile as though someone had made an amusing joke. "Contempt," she repeated softly. "For what?" Not being impressed by this little setup. The entire gallery murmured in disbelief. Someone whispered, "She's digging her own grave." Someone else muttered, "She really thinks she's untouchable." Judge Caprio didn't flinch. "Ms. Cross," he said, "return to your place." Instead of obeying, she turned fully toward him, crossing her arms. Her expression hardened. The casual arrogance curled into full-blown hostility. "You don't get to tell me where to stand," she said. "I'm not one of your bailiff." Caprio said. The sheriff immediately stepped forward, planting himself between Madeline and the exit. His presence wasn't aggressive, but it was unmistakably firm. That was when Madeline's confidence faltered. Her eyes flashed with surprise, just for a fraction of a second. She wasn't used to resistance, certainly not from people she deemed beneath her. "You can't block me from leaving," she snapped. "I can," Judge Caprio replied, "and I will. You are in my courtroom, and you will remain until this hearing is concluded." Her lips parted, as if to argue, but she couldn't find words. No one had stopped her like this in years. She had made hotel managers tremble, investors backtrack, city inspectors bow under pressure. But here, in this modest municipal courtroom, her power had no weight. "Return to your position," Caprio repeated. Madeline slowly walked back, each step losing fragments of the swagger she had earlier. But even when she stood again in front of the bench, the fight in her hadn't disappeared. It had simply taken a different shape. She leaned forward, eyes narrowed. "You're enjoying this, aren't you? Putting a successful woman in her place." Caprio shook his head. "This is not about enjoyment or status. It is about responsibility, something you seemed determined to avoid." Madeline scoffed. "Responsibility? I am responsible for 200 employees, multiple properties, charitable funding. And none of that," Caprio cut in firmly, "exempts you from obeying traffic laws or showing basic respect." She opened her mouth, but he continued. "Let me explain something very clearly," he said. "Your wealth does not shield you here. This court sees people from every walk of life. Some can barely afford their prescriptions. Some have lost jobs. Some work 3 shifts just to feed their families. And yet they come here respectful, humble, willing to listen." Madeline rolled her eyes dramatically. And then, Caprio said, "There are those who believe their success entitles them to ignore everyone else." A long, cold silence followed. Madeline broke it first. "This is ridiculous. You're overreacting. It was just speeding." The judge lifted her citation. "You were going 58 in a 30 zone, in a neighborhood with 2 elementary schools, a senior center, and multiple pedestrian crossings." "Oh, please," she snapped. "Those kids don't even walk outside without their parents. And the elderly. They move so slowly I could see them coming from a mile away." Gasps burst from the gallery. One older woman covered her face, horrified. A man muttered, "She said that out loud." "Wow." Caprio's expression darkened not with anger, but with disappointment, which somehow felt heavier. "Ms. Cross," he said, "the value of a human life is not measured in convenience." She folded her arms, jaw tight. "Look, if you're trying to guilt-trip me, it won't work. I didn't hit anyone. And that," Caprio said, "is luck, not virtue." Madeline bristled. He continued, picking up another document. "This is not your first offense, not your second. You have 3 prior speeding tickets in 2 years, and a warning from an officer who reported you accelerated through a yellow light while he was escorting an elderly woman across the road." "That wasn't my fault," she snapped. "The officer should have moved faster." Several spectators shook their heads. "And," Caprio said, flipping another page, "3 months ago, you passed a school bus that had its stop sign extended. The driver reported it." She stiffened. "That bus driver exaggerated. The sign was barely out." "The video," Caprio said gently, "shows otherwise." Her cheeks reddened, not with shame, but frustration at losing control of the narrative. "You're trying to make me look like a monster," she said. "No," Caprio answered softly. "Your actions are doing that without my help." For the first time, Madeline blinked rapidly, as if struggling to process what was happening. She had built her entire life around the idea that she was untouchable, someone who controlled outcomes simply by asserting her will. But here, the rules were different. The balance of power had shifted, and it terrified her. Caprio leaned back slightly. "Ms. Cross," he said, "tell me, when you drive through that neighborhood at nearly 60 miles an hour, what do you imagine would happen if a child chased a ball into the street?" She said nothing. "What if an elderly person stepped off the curb without hearing you coming?" Silence again. "What if you were the reason a family lost someone they loved?" Madeline looked away. Spears of reality were piercing the armor she had worn for so long, and though she tried to keep her expression neutral, something behind her eyes flickered, something almost human. But her pride wasn't finished fighting. She lifted her chin. "Look, I run 3 businesses. I'm under pressure constantly. I don't have time to crawl around every slow neighborhood. I have deadlines, meetings, responsibilities. And every person in that community," Caprio said, "has a life just as valuable as yours." Her lips pressed into a thin line. "You may not believe that," he added, "but this court does." Madeline breathed out heavily, irritated. "This whole thing is becoming dramatic." "This whole thing," Caprio corrected, "is life and death." She scoffed again, but there was less force behind it, like her arrogance was running out of oxygen. The judge let the silence linger until the room felt wrapped in it. Then he said quietly, "You weren't just speeding, Ms. Cross. You were treating human beings as obstacles. That is why we are here." She looked at him, really looked at him for the first time since stepping into the courtroom. And for a moment shorter than a heartbeat, she looked unsure. The gallery sensed it too. People leaned forward slightly. The unshakable woman was starting to tilt. But her defenses rose again. "Fine," she said coldly. "Tell me the amount. I'll pay it." "Let's finish." Caprio shook his head. "No, Ms. Cross. We're far from finished." Her eyes widened, a reaction she was unable to hide, because for the first time in her life, she realized money wouldn't get her out of this. For a moment, Madeline Cross simply stared at Judge Frank Caprio, as if waiting for him to reveal the punchline of a joke. "We are far from finished." The words hovered in the air like a tightening noose, subtle, unhurried, but undeniably final. Her throat shifted in a small, involuntary swallow. "Excuse me," she said, trying to keep her voice smooth, almost amused. But the edges wavered. Caprio folded his hands on the bench. "Ms. Cross, before we discuss any fine, there is a more serious matter we must address: your conduct in this courtroom." She let out a scoff that cracked under its own weight. "My conduct? Judge, this is absurd. I haven't done anything." "You walked away from a proceeding," Caprio said. "You defied direct instruction. You attempted to leave without permission, and you've repeatedly disrespected the authority of this court." "That's not disrespect," she snapped back. "That's impatience. I have important." He raised a hand, cutting her off without raising his voice. "Everyone who comes through these doors has something important. Work, children, appointments, responsibilities. Yet they stay. They listen. They show respect for the process that keeps our community safe." Madeline clenched her jaw, her eyes narrowing into slits. "You think you're teaching me some kind of moral lesson," she said bitterly. "But what you're really doing is punishing me for not being like the people in this room." Caprio tilted his head slightly. "And how exactly do you imagine the people in this room are?" She didn't answer. She didn't have to. Everyone present already knew the answer because she had been projecting it since she walked in. Lesser, slower, poorer, beneath her. The judge let the silence stretch, letting her non-answer speak louder than any outburst. "Ms. Cross," he said finally, "success does not excuse entitlement, nor does it grant immunity from consequences." Madeline's nostrils flared. "I'm not entitled," she shot back. "I'm efficient. I don't waste time on pointless lectures or bureaucratic rituals." Caprio's expression didn't change, but something in the atmosphere did. like a storm cloud quietly forming. He leaned forward slightly. "Allow me to show you why this is not pointless." He lifted another document, a detailed report. "This is the officer's written account from the day you received your citation." Madeline rolled her eyes. "Oh, wonderful." "According to this," Caprio continued, "when the officer approached your vehicle, you told him, and I quote, 'Find something real to do. My taxes pay your salary.'" Several people in the gallery murmured in disgust. One man muttered, "Unbelievable." Madeline shrugged, unbothered. "He was wasting my time." And yet, Caprio said, "You were the one breaking the law." "Well, maybe," she answered sharply. "The law shouldn't inconvenience people who actually contribute something." That was it. The whole courtroom changed. A low rumble of anger swept through the crowd. Someone scoffed. Another whispered, "She's unbelievable." Caprio raised a hand for silence, then fixed his gaze on Madeline, and something in his eyes, something quiet and immovable, made the room fall still. "Ms. Cross," he said softly, "the officer you spoke to has been on the force for 18 years. He has saved lives, delivered babies, stopped drunk drivers, and responded to tragedies you could not even imagine." She opened her mouth, but he kept going. "He worked overtime during the holiday season to pay for his daughter's braces. He volunteers at a youth center. He has never taken a sick day." Madeline froze. No one had ever spoken to her like this, by giving dignity to someone she had dismissed. "And while you were driving nearly 60 in a residential zone," Caprio continued, "he was protecting the very people whose safety you endangered." Her lips parted, but no sound came out. The gallery was silent, heavy, expectant. "You told him," Caprio said quietly, "my taxes pay your salary." He paused. "But you forgot something important. Your taxes do not purchase his dedication, his sacrifice, or his integrity." A tremor appeared at the edge of Madeline's expression, small, almost invisible. But it was there. Caprio continued. "And now, we will discuss another matter." He picked up a printed report with a yellow highlight streaking across the top. "This," he said, "is the dashcam footage from the officer who nearly ticketed you last year." Madeline bristled, defensive. That was nothing. He exaggerated. "According to the video," Caprio said, "you drove so close to a pedestrian crosswalk that a 72-year-old woman had to step backward to avoid being hit." "That woman stepped back because she was confused," Madeline argued. "She should pay more attention." "And you should drive with more caution," Caprio replied. Madeline exhaled sharply, anger sharpening her voice. "I swear, this whole city is allergic to successful people." "No," Caprio said, "this city is allergic to reckless ones." She glared at him. Her pride, her favorite shield, was cracking. "And there is something else," Caprio added, "something you may not realize." He picked up yet another document. This one shook her. "This is a petition from residents of the neighborhood where you were cited. It includes 32 signatures. They describe your car, your model, your plate, your driving pattern." "What?" she breathed. "They say you speed through their street often, that they fear someone will be hurt." Madeline's face reddened. "That's ridiculous. People exaggerate. I have places to be. I can't crawl along at 30 miles an hour. And they," Caprio said, "have children, parents, grandparents, people they want to see alive tomorrow." Her breath hitched. "Just barely." "And now we come," Caprio said, "to the moment that concerns me most." He looked directly into her eyes. "You walked toward that door because you believed nothing in this room could touch you." Madeline didn't deny it. Her silence was answer enough. "You attempted to leave," he continued, "not because you were confused or frightened or overwhelmed, but because you believed you were above this court." Her lips tightened, but she didn't speak. "And that, Ms. Cross, is why we are not finished." The gallery was still. Not a cough, not a whisper. Madeline's eyes flicked downward reflexively, unwillingly, as if the judge's words weighed on her physically. He leaned back. "Ms. Cross," he said, "do you understand why we are continuing?" She inhaled shakily, then forced herself into composure. "You're trying to teach me humility," she said. "No," Caprio replied gently. "Humility cannot be taught, but responsibility can be required." "Responsibility," she echoed. "Yes," he said, "especially from those who have the most impact on others." Madeline stared at him. Her ego was wounded, defensive, fighting to stay upright, but beneath it, something else stirred. Recognition, fear, and maybe the smallest sliver of truth. Caprio tapped her citation lightly. "We are continuing," he said softly, "because reckless driving can kill, because arrogance blinds, and because the law must serve as a reminder even to those who think they do not need reminders." Madeline swallowed. For the first time since stepping into the courtroom, she looked human. Not infallible, not untouchable, just human. And the room could feel it. "Now," Judge Caprio said, "let us proceed." Madeline Cross stood stiffly at the bench, her posture still proud, but something subtle had shifted. The room could sense it. Her chin wasn't tilted quite as high. Her stare wasn't quite as sharp. Even the way she clutched her designer handbag, a bag that cost more than some spectators' yearly rent, had lost its casual swagger. But she wasn't beaten. Not yet. Her pride, battered as it was, still clung to its last scraps of defiance. "So what now?" she said, folding her arms. Another dramatic speech. Another exaggerated accusation meant to, what? Break me. Her voice trembled, though she tried desperately to keep it strong. Judge Caprio didn't react to the tone. He didn't need to. He simply picked up the next paper. "I want to discuss the pattern," he said calmly. Madeline scoffed. "There is no pattern." "I'm just Miss Cross," he interrupted. "Everything you've said since you walked in here confirms the pattern." Her eyes narrowed. "A pattern," Caprio continued, "of dismissing laws, dismissing people, and dismissing consequences. That's not a pattern," she snapped. "That's efficiency. I move fast. I live fast. I don't have time to respect those around you," he finished. Her lips clamped shut. He continued reading. "This report documents several complaints from residents. They say you often drive while on your phone. They say you honk aggressively. They say you've shouted at pedestrians." Madeline lifted her chin again, regaining some haughtiness. People love to exaggerate when someone successful lives nearby. They resent it. Caprio looked at her thoughtfully. "Do you believe they resent your success or your behavior?" She didn't answer. Not because she didn't want to, but because answering honestly would require acknowledging a truth she didn't want to face. "Let me tell you what I see," Caprio said in a steady tone. "A woman who worked very hard to build something. A woman who achieved wealth most people only dream of. A woman who believes that success means speed-fast decisions, fast results, fast driving." Madeline softened slightly. She wasn't used to judges acknowledging the work behind her wealth. But somewhere along the way, Caprio continued. "You started mistaking speed for superiority." Her jaw tightened. "And when the world didn't move as fast as you wanted it to, you stopped seeing people as people. They became obstacles, inconveniences, delays." Her eyes flickered. "Tell me," Caprio said, "does anyone in your life ever tell you no?" Madeline's expression hardened instantly, a crack of genuine vulnerability flashing before she buried it behind steel. "That's none of your business." "It is," Caprio said gently, "when that is the reason you nearly walked out of a courtroom." The air thickened again. Her breathing tightened. Her composure wavered. "Success does not shield us from accountability, Ms. Cross," he said. She swallowed hard. He continued, "You think this courtroom is beneath you because it's small, because we handle traffic citations instead of corporate lawsuits. But let me tell you something." He leaned forward. "More lives are saved in these small courtrooms than in any boardroom you've ever entered." She blinked. "Every person we prevent from speeding, every distracted driver we correct, every young driver we educate that saves families, marriages, futures." Her gaze shifted, unfocused, as if she had been pulled out of her world and forced to look at another. "You think your fine buys you a clean conscience," Caprio said softly. "But what would you buy for the mother who loses her child because someone didn't think 30 miles per hour mattered?" Her chin trembled, just barely. Behind her, the gallery held its breath. No one moved. No one whispered. It felt like everyone was watching a thin glass barrier around Madeline crack, piece by piece. But then the pride snapped back. She crossed her arms tightly, a shield across her chest. "You're lecturing me about hypothetical tragedies," she said, voice cold again. "Meanwhile, I've never had an accident. Not one. Isn't that what matters?" "No," Caprio replied immediately. "What matters is how close you've come." She flinched without meaning to. He picked up another report. 3 months ago, a mother pushing a stroller reported that your car sped so close beside her, she felt the wind push the stroller backward. "That's ridiculous," Madeline hissed. She exaggerated. People lie. Yet the dash cam footage from another vehicle corroborates her story. Madeline's mouth opened and closed like she was searching for an excuse, any excuse, as panic flickered in her eyes. But nothing came. "You didn't see her," Caprio said softly, "because you weren't looking." Silence again. "You see speed," he added. "Deadlines. Your own path." He paused. "You do not see people." Madeline looked away sharply, as if the floor might rescue her. "And that," Caprio said, "is more dangerous than any speeding violation." She inhaled sharply through her nose. "You don't know me," she said. "You don't know who I am or what I've done." "I know exactly who you're showing me today," he replied. Her jaw clenched painfully tight. "And today," he said, "you've shown me someone who believes rules are for the people behind her, never for herself." She blinked fast, but whether from anger, stress, or something more complicated, no one could tell. "I am not the villain you're trying to make me," she whispered fiercely. Caprio softened his voice. "I don't think you're a villain, Ms. Cross. I think you're a person who has forgotten the weight of her actions." Her throat bobbed. "A person who has been going so fast for so long," he continued. "She hasn't noticed the danger she leaves in her wake." She closed her eyes just for a brief, fragile second. And for the first time, she didn't look like the CEO commanding a conference room. She looked like a woman who had been carrying too much for too long, behind walls so thick even she couldn't see past them. But the vulnerability was brief. She opened her eyes sharply. "This is ridiculous," she said. "Just tell me the fine so I can pay and leave." Caprio sat back slowly. "That," he said, "is the heart of the problem." She frowned. "What? You think this ends when you pay?" "It does," she insisted. "No," he said quietly. "It ends when you understand." She went rigid. "And Ms. Cross," he added, "you're very far from understanding." Her pride flared. Her voice came out sharper. "Then what do you want from me?" The judge didn't hesitate. "Accountability." "For what?" "For the danger you've caused. For the disrespect you've shown. For believing your time is worth more than people's lives. For nearly walking out of this room." Madeline opened her mouth, but no sound came. For the first time, it wasn't arrogance that silenced her. It was truth. A truth sharper than any insult she'd thrown. A truth that struck deeper than any fine could. "You may continue pretending this is just about speeding," Caprio said. "But we both know it's about the person you've become on the road." Madeline's shoulders slumped, barely perceptible, but unmistakable. "And today," he concluded quietly, "that needs to change." She stared at him, her breathing shaky, her foundation cracking. But she still had one card, left one she had played in boardrooms, negotiations, and conflicts for years. Her voice steadied, icy once more. "Judge," she said, "you're making this personal." "And if there's one thing I do not tolerate, Ms. Cross," he interrupted softly, "accountability is personal." Her mouth closed. Completely. The gallery watched in awe. The storm inside her wasn't over, not even close, but for the first time, lightning had hit the ground. And they all knew. The breaking point was coming. For the first time since she walked into the courtroom, Madeline Cross didn't have an immediate comeback. Her lips pressed together, trembling almost imperceptibly. Her mind, once so quick to dismiss, belittle, and bulldoze anyone in her path, now churned in a thick silence. Judge Caprio watched her with the steady patience of someone who'd seen every kind of person stand where she stood, the broken, the angry, the confused, the hopeless. But there was something different about Madeline. Her armor wasn't cracked by life's circumstances. It was forged by privilege. It was harder, older, familiar, and it had taken root over decades. "Ms. Cross," he said softly, "I'm now going to address the consequences." Her spine stiffened at that word. Consequences. It landed like a cold hand gripping the back of her neck. "Your original fine for speeding," he continued, "was $350. Madeline inhaled sharply, as if preparing to roll her eyes, and dismissed the number as irrelevant. "But due to your behavior in this courtroom, I am raising it to the maximum allowable penalty." Her composure slipped. "Just a fraction." "What?" she hissed. $500, Caprio said, "plus court costs." Her jaw clenched, lips tightening until the shade of her expensive lipstick thinned to a pale line. "This is ridiculous," she whispered, shaking her head. "You're being punitive." "No, Ms. Cross," Caprio answered calmly. "I am being responsible. You can't increase a fine just because he raised a finger. I can, and I have. You attempted to walk out of the courtroom. That alone demonstrates willful defiance." She sucked in a breath, as if insulted directly. "And," he added, "I am also imposing a mandatory driver safety course. 30 days to complete it." Madeline actually laughed a bitter, sharp sound. "A safety course. For me? I've been driving longer than half the people in this room have been alive." "Clearly," he replied, "longevity does not equal proficiency." Her face reddened. "And once that course is completed," he continued, "you will provide certification to this court." "This is absurd," she said, voice trembling now with something far more human panic. "And," Caprio said gently but firmly, "we are not done." Her head jerked upward. "Given your disrespectful conduct, your refusal to follow instructions, and your attempt to leave this courtroom without permission, I am adding a contempt of court charge." It hit her like a slap. "That will be an additional $200. She stared at him, wide-eyed. "And your total fines and fees," he continued, "come to $850. A stunned silence fell over the courtroom. Madeline's chest rose and fell faster now. Her foundation, her perfect mask, began to crack under the weight of real consequences. "This is insane," she said, voice cracking. "You're treating me like a criminal." "No," Caprio replied. "I am treating you like someone who needs a reminder that the law applies equally to all." Her voice shot up. "I'll appeal this." "You may," he said. "And I encourage you to explain to the appellate judge why you treated this courtroom with contempt." She opened her mouth closed. It opened it again, but no words came. Her eyes darted around the room, searching for someone, anyone, who might validate her outrage. But she met only quiet, steady stares, some sympathetic, most exhausted, many quietly satisfied. The people she had dismissed as lesser were now seeing her stripped bare of the armor she'd spent years perfecting. "Judge Caprio," she said, voice quieter but trembling with fury, "you are punishing me for being successful." He shook his head. "Success is not the issue. Behavior is." "You don't know what it's like," she whispered harshly, "to be responsible for hundreds of people, to manage millions of dollars, to have no room for mistakes." "And that," he replied gently, "is exactly why you should understand responsibility better than anyone." She blinked rapidly, the first sign that her anger was beginning to lose its footing. "This is humiliation," she said. "No," he said, "this is accountability." Her eyes shimmered with something dangerously close to tears, but she refused to let them fall. "Ms. Cross," Caprio continued, You act as if every request, every rule, every law is a personal attack on your time. But these laws exist to protect people, and people matter whether you happen to be driving past them or not. She stared at him, frozen. Do you know, he asked softly, how many families come before this court after losing someone to reckless driving? Madeline looked away. Do you know how many children never make it home because someone thought their schedule was more important than the speed limit? She swallowed hard, deeply, painfully. Do you know, he said, what it's like to look a parent in the eyes after their child has been killed by a driver going too fast in a residential zone? Her eyelids fluttered. She had never considered any of this. Not truly, not deeply. Your success, he said, does not give you the right to endanger others. She whispered, I didn't endanger anyone. He met her gaze, calm but unwavering. You came closer than you think. A tremor moved through her shoulders. And now, he said, you must face the consequences. She exhaled shakily, her arrogance melting like wax under a steady flame. She wasn't used to being powerless. She wasn't used to being corrected. She wasn't used to being seen, especially not like this. Madeline Cross was not the type to cry in public. If her world ever cracked, she made sure no one watched. But this wasn't her world. Not anymore. This was Judge Caprio's. For the first time, her voice came out small. Can I at least explain? Caprio nodded gently. You may. She hesitated. The gallery leaned forward. I work constantly, she said quietly. I'm always in motion, always rushing, always being pulled from one thing to another. Work is not an excuse for recklessness, Caprio said. I know, she snapped, then softened. I mean, I know. I don't slow down, ever. And maybe I've forgotten how. There, it was the soft underside beneath the steel. She continued, voice trembling at the edges. You think I feel superior, but it's not. It's not that simple. I built everything I have from scratch. I can't let anything slow me down. If I lose momentum, if I fall behind, everything collapses. People depend on me. Caprio listened slowly, nodding. And somewhere along the way, she whispered, I stopped seeing people as people. I saw them as timing obstacles. It was the first genuine thing she'd said. The room was silent. Caprio spoke gently. And the people you endangered, they have families. Lives. People who depend on them. Their time matters too. Their safety matters. She wiped her cheek discreetly, but not discreetly enough. And today, he said, you learned that your world is not the only one that exists. She nodded slowly. She didn't resist it. Not anymore. Ms. Cross, Caprio concluded, your fine stands. Your safety course stands. And your contempt charge stands. She inhaled sharply but didn't argue. But more importantly, he added, I hope today stands as something far greater, a reminder. A reminder, she whispered. That your success means nothing, he said, if it comes at the cost of others' safety. Her shoulders sagged. The last piece of her barrier fell. The gallery watched, stunned. The queen of entitlement had finally reached her limit. Caprio looked at her with compassion. You can recover money, he said, but you cannot recover a life. Madeline closed her eyes, and for the first time she understood. For several long seconds, Madeline Cross said nothing. Her shoulders, usually squared with boardroom confidence, now sloped with something much heavier. The slow realization that she had crossed a line she could no longer pretend didn't exist. But pride is a stubborn creature, even wounded. It fights. She took a deep breath and straightened a fraction, trying to reclaim the posture she entered with. She lifted her chin, wiped the last glimmer of moisture from her eyes, and said, Fine. I'll pay. I'll take your course. I'll accept your consequences. Caprio didn't move. He didn't nod. He didn't close her case. Instead, he said quietly, There is one more matter. Her head snapped up. What now? She demanded, more tired than angry. You attempted to walk out of this courtroom, he said. You dismissed the authority of this court, mocked the process, and repeatedly belittled everyone around you. She stiffened again, defensive instincts kicking back in. I already got a contempt charge, she said. Isn't that enough? Caprio shook his head slowly. No, Ms. Cross. Not yet. Her eyes narrowed. What else do you want from me? Caprio folded his hands. An apology. She stared at him as if he'd spoken in a foreign language. An apology? She repeated. Yes, he said. To this court. Sincerely, directly, without excuses. She let out a half laugh, half scoff. You're kidding. No, Caprio said. I am not. Madeline shook her head, incredulous. You want me to apologize like I'm a child who broke a window. No, he said. I want you to acknowledge the harmful behavior you displayed here today. She crossed her arms, a reflexive wall. I already said I'd take responsibility. Isn't that enough? No, Caprio said again, and his voice was firm now, unmovable. Not when your behavior undermined the dignity and purpose of this court. Not when you walked in here treating people like they were beneath you. I didn't, Ms. Cross, he interrupted gently but sharply. You did. She froze. He let the silence sit for a moment, letting the truth settle into the space between them. You called this process pointless, he continued. You implied that the officer who cited you was wasting your time. You insulted the community whose children you endangered. And you tried to walk out in the middle of a legal proceeding. Her throat tightened against her will. This is not about humiliation, Caprio said. This is about accountability. Accountability for the harm you caused, the disrespect you showed, and the message you sent. What message? She whispered. That you believe you are above others. Her lips parted. She didn't argue. She couldn't. And until you can acknowledge that, Caprio added, this case is not concluded. She looked away anywhere but at him, as if the wood grain on the floor might offer her escape. The judge said quietly, Ms. Cross, I am waiting. Her jaw clenched. Her fingers curled around her handbag. She inhaled deeply like someone walking into a cold ocean. She turned back to him. You want a sincere apology, she said. That's what you need to close this. Yes, Caprio replied. Her nostrils flared a last flare of resistance, and then she exhaled shakily. Fine, she said. But he didn't accept that. No, Caprio said. Not fine. Sincerity. She stared at him, trembling slightly, as frustration and humiliation warred inside her. I don't see why this matters so much. Because, Caprio said, if you cannot apologize here, in a safe place where consequences are minimal, how will you ever change the way you behave out there, where consequences can be deadly? Her breath caught. She looked down at the floor. Her voice softened, cracked, lost its edges. I don't do apologies, she whispered. Then today is a good day to learn, he replied gently. The gallery waited in complete silence. Madeline remained frozen, trapped between pride and truth, between the life she had built and the reality she denied, between the version of herself she showed the world and the version she desperately didn't want anyone to see. She took another breath, then another. Her voice, when it came, was small. I apologize, she said quickly, almost mechanically. Caprio shook his head. No. That's not it. Her eyes burned with frustration. What do you want me to say? The truth, he replied. Say what you are truly apologizing for. She swallowed. Her next words came slower, strained. I apologize for disrespecting the court. Caprio didn't respond. He simply waited. She inhaled shakily again. And, she added, for trying to walk out. That was wrong. The gallery watched, transfixed. Her voice wavered. And for acting like I was above the rules. She blinked, and one tear slipped despite her best effort to stop it. For acting, like other people, didn't matter as much as I do. Her lips trembled. For being reckless and rude. And, she breathed, wrong. The room remained utterly still. Judge Caprio nodded once slowly. Now, he said, that is an apology. Madeline lowered her head. Her shoulders shook once. She didn't sob. She would never allow herself that. But the room felt the weight of her internal collapse. She had spent years building herself into a fortress. Today, the walls cracked. Caprio let her breathe before continuing. "Ms. Cross," he said gently, "you have done something today that many people with great power never learn to do. You acknowledge your mistakes. That takes strength, not weakness." She looked up, wiping her cheek. In her eyes, for the first time, there was no arrogance, no contempt, no shield, just a woman who finally saw the truth of her own reflection. He continued, "This court is not here to break people. It is here to correct course, to protect lives, to remind us that we share the road and the world with others." Madeline nodded slowly. "And I promise you," Caprio said, "if you take this lesson seriously, you will be a better driver, a better leader, and perhaps a better person." Her lip trembled. She whispered, "I will." The gallery watched quietly. Sympathy began to replace judgment. Understanding softened the tension. Caprio leaned back. "Very well, Ms. Cross," he said. "Your apology is accepted." A visible relief washed over her, though she tried to hide it. "But," he added, "we have one final matter to discuss." Her eyes widened again, panic flickering back to life. "What else?" she said, exhausted. Caprio's voice was calm, even gentle. "I need your word that you will not receive another speeding citation in the next 12 months. If you do, I will personally review your case and consider suspension of your driver's license." Madeline's breath hitched. I understand. You will drive responsibly?" he asked. "Yes," she said quickly. "I will." "You will complete the safety course?" "Yes." "You will pay your fines within 30 days?" "Yes, Your Honor." Her voice held no trace of sarcasm. No defiance, only sincerity. He nodded. "Then you may step back." Madeline didn't move right away. She stayed still, breathing, absorbing everything. And then she stepped back from the bench, not with the poised strut she'd entered with, but with a slow, humbled walk that made the room feel different. As she returned to her place, the courtroom murmured not in mockery or triumph, but in recognition that they had witnessed something rare. A transformation, and it wasn't over yet. Madeline Cross didn't return to her seat the way she had arrived in the courtroom hours earlier. There was no clicking dominance in her heels, no dazzling confidence dripping from every step, no dismissive glances tossed at the people around her. She moved slowly, almost cautiously, as if each step required her to learn a new way of inhabiting the world. The courtroom watched her with a collective hush. Some faces showed disbelief. Others showed empathy, but none held the resentment they had earlier. The temperature in the room had shifted, not just because of what Judge Caprio had said, but because of what Madeline had finally allowed herself to hear. She sat down, unaware that her posture had changed. Her shoulders no longer arched like a warning sign. They settled, drawn inward, softened by the weight of something she had refused to carry for years, accountability. But Judge Caprio wasn't finished. He waited for her to settle before addressing her again, because this final moment wasn't about punishment or authority. It was about something far more lasting. "Ms. Cross," he said gently, "please step forward once more." Her head jerked up. "I've already apologized. Why me again?" But she did not resist. She stood, walked to the bench, and folded her hands in front of her. A quiet humility radiated from her that no one expected to see today. "Yes, Your Honor," she said, voice small but steady. "I want to leave you with a lesson," Caprio said, not as a judge speaking to a defendant, but as an elder speaking to someone who has forgotten the value of slowing down. She looked at him, genuinely listening, perhaps for the first time. He continued, "Your life moves quickly. Your industry moves quickly. The world you built for yourself, success, wealth. Pressure demands that you keep moving. I understand that." Her eyes softened. She hadn't expected understanding. Compassion caught her off guard, more than the fines or the lecture ever could. But speed, Caprio said, is not the same as progress, and control is not the same as wisdom. The room fell silent, as if every spectator felt the weight of those words settle into the air. He went on, "When you rush, when you act without seeing others, when you prioritize your world over the shared world, you create danger, not just on the road but in your life, in your relationships, in your humanity." Madeline's throat tightened. She didn't know why this hit her harder than anything else, but it did. Caprio's voice remained calm, warm, but unshakably firm. "You are a leader, Ms. Cross. People look up to you, depend on you. Leadership requires responsibility, not only to profits and deadlines, but to the people who exist around you. The clerk you insulted, the officer you dismissed, the community you endangered." She swallowed hard. The truth felt heavier than any fine. "And today," Caprio said, "you had an opportunity to walk away unchanged." Her eyes widened. She remembered the door, the step she took, the moment she almost fled, confident no one could stop her. "And you almost took it," he added, "but you didn't. And that matters." Madeline blinked rapidly, trying to keep tears from spilling. Caprio softened his voice even more. "You showed humility, Ms. Cross. You stepped back. You apologized sincerely. And you listened." A small breath escaped her lips. She hadn't realized until this moment how badly she needed someone to acknowledge that she tried. "Now," he said, "you must prove to yourself, not to me, that this day meant something." Madeline nodded slowly. Caprio leaned forward. "The next time you're in your car," he said, "and you're tempted to speed because you're late, I want you to remember this moment." She inhaled sharply. "When you see a child on the sidewalk or an elderly neighbor by the crosswalk, I want you to remember this moment." Her chin trembled. "When someone frustrates you or moves slower than you'd like, I want you to remember this moment." Her eyes glistened. "And I want you to remember," Caprio said softly, "that your time is not more valuable than anyone else's life." A tear slid down her cheek. This time, she didn't hide it. Caprio sat back. "You may now handle your payment with the clerk, and you must complete the safety course within 30 days. If you receive another speeding violation within the next year, I will personally review your case." "Yes, Your Honor," she whispered. "Do you have any questions?" Madeline hesitated, then shook her head. "No. Just thank you." The room felt the sincerity in her voice. It wasn't gratitude for leniency because she didn't get any. It was gratitude for being seen, challenged, and corrected by someone who didn't want to break her ego, but reshape her perspective. Caprio nodded. "You're dismissed." Madeline stepped away from the bench with a different walk, not the confident, brash stride of a woman who believed the world bent around her, not the frantic rush of someone always running toward the next crisis. Her steps were slow, measured, awake. As she approached the clerk's desk, she passed an elderly woman sitting near the aisle. Earlier, Madeline hadn't even seen her, just another body taking up space. But now she paused, turned slightly, and offered a quiet, respectful nod. The woman smiled warmly, and something inside Madeline softened further. Then, near the courtroom doors, a young boy no older than 8 sat with his mother, swinging his legs anxiously. He glanced up at Madeline as she approached, his eyes curious but wary. Maybe he had sensed her earlier tension. Children often do. Madeline paused again. She met his eyes, gave him a tiny, gentle smile, not the performative, polished smile she used for magazine covers or charity events. A real one. The boy smiled back hesitantly, then fully, and something shifted deep within her, a small but undeniable transformation. When she reached the clerk's desk, Madeline opened her wallet hand steady now and paid the $850 fine without complaint. As she did, she caught her reflection in the small glass divider. Her eyes looked different, calmer, softer, less hardened by the world she ran so fiercely. For the first time in years, she didn't rush her steps. She didn't check her watch. She didn't rehearse her next meeting in her head. She simply walked out of the courtroom, down the hallway, toward the exit. But just before stepping through the door, she stopped, turned, looked back at the courtroom she had once considered beneath her. A courtroom that, in just 1 hour, had done something her money, power, and success had never managed. It slowed her down. It made her listen. It reminded her she was human. And that humanity, not wealth, not status, was what mattered most. With a long, quiet breath, Madeline stepped outside into the bright afternoon sun. The world hadn't changed, but she had. In the end, Madeline Cross discovered a truth that many of us learn only after life forces us to slow down. That success without humility becomes isolation, and speed without awareness becomes danger. No matter how high we climb, we still share the world and the road with others whose lives matter just as deeply as our own. Judge Caprio's Courtroom reminds us that justice is not about punishment, but about perspective, about seeing the humanity we sometimes overlook, about understanding that responsibility grows with privilege, not away from it. So ask yourself, when life gets fast, when frustration rises, when you feel more important than the people around you, will you remember to slow down? Comment below what part of this story resonated with you most. And if you want more powerful, emotional courtroom stories like this, make sure to subscribe.